Hello and welcome to You with Jesus. This is an incredible story. In fact, so incredible, Jesus said that wherever the gospel is preached in the world, this story would be told alongside it. Now, the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and teachers of the law were scheming to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him, but not during the festival, they said, or the people may riot. While I was in Bethany reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. "Leave her alone," said Jesus. "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them at any time you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Truly I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted to hear this and promised to give him money, so he watched for an opportunity to hand him over. Of no other person except this one did Jesus ever say, "This story will be told throughout the world whenever the gospel is preached." I must confess to preaching the gospel many times, but not telling this story. And yet Jesus holds up this woman's example above the example of any other example in his entire ministry. Why? Let's try and answer that question in this episode. But a few quick things to note first. This event took place a few days before Christ was to be crucified and laid in a tomb. It took place in Bethany, which is just outside of Jerusalem near the Mount of Olives. And that was the town Jesus retreated to each night that he was in Jerusalem for his final visit. It took place in the home of Simon the leper. This is the one and only time Simon the leper is mentioned in the Bible. It's probable that Jesus had healed him, and Simon is hosting the meal to show his appreciation and introduce his friends to Jesus. We're speculating, but that's my backstory. There's a phrase in this story that has often been wrongly understood, and I hope you know which one it is. The poor you will always have with you. This is just a statement of fact. Nothing more, nothing less. It certainly shouldn't be taken to mean that because the poor are always with us, that we shouldn't prioritize being generous to the poor. In fact, at another dinner party that Jesus attended, he specifically stated that true spirituality begins by being generous to the poor. What Jesus is saying is, you will always have poor. That's just stating the obvious. But then he's saying, but right here, right now, the most important thing that this woman could do in light of my impending death with that bottle of expensive perfume was to pour it over me and anoint me for burial. And do you really think people are objecting in the room because a woman is wasting a bottle of perfume over Jesus? Do you think they would have sold that bottle if they owned it and given all the proceeds to the poor? In fact, John's account of what is believed to be the same event, Judas is named as the one who suggests that the perfume could have been sold and the money given to the poor. And John says he did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. So back to the woman. Who was she? Well, if this is the same event in the other Gospels, the other Gospels have a different emphasis in different places, but I think it is the same event. Then the woman is Mary from Bethany. That is the same Mary that was sitting at Jesus' feet listening to him. Her sister was Martha. Her brother was Lazarus, who'd been raised from the dead. So it's not Mary Magdalene from Magdala in Galilee, and it isn't Mary, the mother of Jesus. Mary from Bethany had already been commended by Jesus as someone who was in the habit of choosing what was better. Instead of running around in the kitchen in a state of panic, she was sitting listening to Jesus at his feet. She had, in Jesus' words, chosen what is better. And here she is again, choosing what is better, cracking a whole jar of expensive perfume over Jesus, despite the protests of everybody else in the house. And Jesus doesn't attempt to stop her. He watches her carry the jar toward him. He hears her crack open the jar, and then he feels and smells an entire jar of nard, a potent and expensive perfume, go from the top of his head to the soles of his feet as an act of worship from a devoted woman. And we know it went to the feet because she ends up wiping his feet with her hair, as it says in the other Gospels. Try and place yourself in this scene for a moment. Can you imagine? And then there's the response of these sensible menfolk who spoke indignant to one another and rebuked her harshly. Imagine that scene. This was no minor awkwardness. No, they're on their feet. They're pointing. They are loudly vocal in their opposition. They're greatly agitated. And it's happening as a group. There is no one coming to her defense. And into this bullying moment, Jesus speaks, leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? Literally, why are you causing suffering to her? There are many stories like this in the Gospels where Jesus flips the narrative on group opinions and attitudes, particularly toward women. The church, down through centuries, may have contributed, in fact has contributed, to institutional misogyny over the years, but it was never the attitude of Jesus. Jesus goes way further, mind you, than simply defending her. He lavishes praise on her and holds her up as an example of what true devotion looks like. He says, she has done a beautiful thing to me. And her story is going to be told wherever the gospel is preached. Wow. And this was no rush of blood moment to smash expensive perfume over someone she just met. I give you everything, Jesus. No, it was a premeditated act of worship, possibly years in the making. John's record of the event says this. Jesus said it was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. Had she been praying and waiting for this moment, knowing that Jesus would be going to his death, for how many years had she been storing this jar away, knowing that one day she would anoint the Messiah for burial? The thing that separates the woman from everybody else in the room is she gets it. She knows who Jesus is, and she knows why he has come. And she's going to respond accordingly, and no crowd bullying of men is going to stop her. The use of perfumes and oils in the Old Testament provides further insights into the significance of what's happening here. Number one, it echoes the anointing of priests in the Old Testament. The temple priests were anointed with sacred oil to set them apart or consecrate them for God's service. They would then be able to come into God's presence on behalf of the people to present sacrifices in worship. Jesus is being anointed here as our great high priest. And he, within days of this event, would present his body as the one-time, final, and perfect sacrifice for the sins of all humanity. Number two, it symbolized Jesus' kingship. The head of kings was anointed with oil to signify the Spirit of God choosing them and empowering them for the role. The woman's anointing of Jesus publicly identifies Jesus as the true anointed one. And that phrase, anointed one, is where we get this term Messiah in Hebrew, which in Greek is Christ. Both of those phrases mean anointed one. Anointed by what? Anointed by oil and by the Spirit. The woman clearly recognizes that Jesus is the one true King sent by God. Number three, it foreshadowed Jesus' burial. In Matthew and John's account, Jesus explicitly says that this anointing was for my burial. Perfumed oils and spices were used to honor and prepare the body of kings for burial. This act of pouring out nard on Jesus' body points forward to Jesus' death and burial, showing that his kingship comes through sacrificial death. This king was a servant king who would give his life for others. And finally, it demonstrated extravagant love and true worship. The woman gives something costly, beautiful, and irreversible. Breaking the jar means she offered all, not just a little. Those around you might think you've gone a bit overboard on this whole Christianity thing, but that's only because they haven't understood or seen who Jesus is. When in a former life I was a youth pastor, I would often have kids say to me that their parents were happy that they were going to church and youth group, but then they would add, just don't get too fanatical. So it wasn't outright opposition, but it was an effort to moderate it and keep it within respectable limits. And today, the underlying messages could look like, look, let's just keep our faith all neat and compartmentalized. You can have it on Sunday, but don't go preaching to me Monday to Saturday. Let's not go overboard. Don't embarrass the family. Don't go preaching to people. Don't get all emotional about it. Don't waste your life studying theology or working for the church or going off in a mission organization. Don't start posting stuff on social media. Don't go mentioning Jesus in the workplace. Don't go giving away your hard-earned cash to various causes. Whatever it might be, there's pressure to rein it in. Keep it nice, civil, and polite. This outrageous, extravagant, countercultural devotion of the woman stands eternally as an example of what wholehearted love for God looks like, which is why Jesus said this story would be told wherever the gospel is preached. And what is the gospel? It is the good news that Jesus laid down his life for us in an outrageous and extravagant way. And the only sensible response is to be outrageously extravagant in our devotion and love to him. See you in the next episode.